Hey everybody, this is Tim with the University of Vinyl, back today with another video. I'm going to feature another mastering engineer. This guy is from the UK originally, and he has done a ton of work. Primarily, these are UK pressings, but today I'm going to actually feature 5 US pressings that are still fairly easy to find that this individual mastered. And the guy I'm talking about is George Peckham. I touched on him briefly in my last video, taking a look at the Led Zeppelin catalog. Anyway, George Peckham got his start working for Apple Records, working actually for the Beatles label in the late 60s, and actually mastered a couple singles for the Beatles just as they were breaking up off the Let It Be album. He moved on and started mastering titles in several different genres of rock and roll, including a lot of stuff in prog, progressive rock, not the Czech Republic, your classic rock, bread and butter bands and titles, many of which that we all know well and love. And then in the 80s and into the 90s, he started branching out into new wave and punk. So he's had a tremendous breadth of work out there. And George Peckham is pretty unique because, you know, instead of Robert Ludwig with his iconic RL that will be etched in the deadwax of things that he's mastered, or another example would be Alan Zentz with the AZ. We have George Peckham, and it's usually not GP, but it's going to be a different variation or nickname that George Peckham has or is known by. A few come to mind: Pecko, a Porky's Prime Cut, Porky being a nickname for George Peckham, obviously. So also there would be Porky, there would be Pecko Duck, and then there would be other sayings that actually might take a bit of a swipe at the band. Do a little research on Discogs, just type in George Peckham, you'll find the laundry list of titles that he has mastered, but just reeling off a few of the bold-faced names that he's been involved with. The Beatles, previously mentioned, John Lennon, Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, Joy Division, Average White Band, Joe Jackson, Dinosaur Jr., the list goes on. So today we're going to take a look at 5 albums that George Peckham has mastered. These are albums to seek out if you don't have them already in your collection. If you already have them, check out the deadwax. It's always a bit of a fun to pull those out and look into that information. You might already be holding on to some of these already. There's a very, very famous one that I'm going to feature. Stay tuned, it's going to be the 5th album I'm going to feature, probably the most famous George Peckham cut out there. But I'm going to take a look at 3 albums from 1974 as well, and another album I'm going to lead off with, which was released in 1977. So what about George Peckham and his mastering style? This guy was known for a hot mix, a huge soundstage. These things were mastered quite loud, and George Peckham, there's a video out there on YouTube. I'm going to drop a link down below. You can watch the guy in his own words explaining his style, but he typically wanted to amp everything up as much as possible and bring things to the forefront and make that band's work shine on vinyl. And I'm here today to tell you these things obviously definitely shine, and they are well worth your while in seeking out. Stay tuned. In the spring of 1977, AC/DC released their fourth album, Let There Be Rock. And this is one of my favorite AC/DC albums. And I have the George Peckham pressing here. Now this came out as a George Peckham mastered version in the UK, but there are also US versions. I have the Atco label. Now inside one in the deadwax, what you're going to be looking for is a Porky Prime Cut. And this particular pressing, side 2, has Master Room etched into the deadwax. A little bit of research and you can definitely find out, but this is a George Peckham mastered pressing, and this is pushed to the limit, let's say, as far as the soundstage is concerned. It is mixed loud. There's one drawback, I would say. There are a couple spots with a couple songs. I wrote down a note here because I just played it again. Side 2, the song Overdose. There's a lot of cymbal washout in the very beginning of that song. Kind of works its way into a bit of sibilance. But do some research online. Look at the Steve Hoffman forums. The Porky cut for Let There Be Rock ranks very, very high amongst AC/DC aficionados, and I am really, really happy that I have this in my collection. It's not that easy to find. AC/DC albums are not always that easy to find, to be honest, but other than the Robert Ludwig cut Back in Black album, I think this is the best sounding AC/DC pressing out there. And of course, you know, the music can't be beat. Let There Be Rock. You know, one of the things I remember that stands out on this album, on the title song, you have the rhythm guitar of Malcolm Young on the left channel, and the couple solos that Angus has and launches into, and keyword being launch with this pressing, they are coming out of the right channel. So really nice separation, awesome soundstage. This mix has kind of been described as nasty or angry, but it is well worth seeking out. I found one on Discogs, and I didn't pay, you know, through the nose for it. We're talking less than $40. But keep your eyes open, keep your eyes peeled when you're out and about. Put out an alert on Discogs and see if you can get lucky. But there it is, definitely a Porky Prime Cut. Let There Be Rock, 1977, AC/DC. The second album I wanted to feature today that's been mastered by George Peckham is an album by Jethro Tull, and this was released in 1974. This, of course, is War Child. Now, let's be honest, War Child is not another Thick as a Brick or even Aqualung, right? This album, when it came out, famously Rolling Stone reviewed the album, and one of the main takeaways from the review is they had mentioned that, remember, Tull rhymes with dull. But you know, one of the earliest memories I have, I grew up in Michigan, and I had grandparents in the Detroit area, and I used to have a summer vacation where I would go down there, spend a couple of weeks with my grandparents, and I had a couple of uncles as well who were in the area. We would go to Tiger games at Tiger Stadium in downtown Detroit. Fantastic stadium, RIP. Anyway, one of the songs, you know, at the time, WRIF, The Riff, was one of the leading rock FM stations in Detroit. It still is, I think. And Bungle in the Jungle I just remember that song playing on the radio frequently in 1974, 1975, and onward. It's still in heavy rotation, probably on FM radio. I wouldn't know because I've moved on from FM radio. But anyway, that's probably the most famous cut on this album, Bungle in the Jungle. However, so this is definitely a Porky cut. Porky is in the deadwax on side 1 and side 2. Check that. Side 1 is Porky, side 2 is Pecko. But worth seeking out. Yeah, I didn't have this album in my collection. I found it recently for $6. It is on that green label with the butterfly, the chrysalis label, in great condition, very quiet, and again, really good mix of, or really good separation of instruments on this album. You've got Ian Anderson going off with the flute in various songs. Martin Barr's guitar sounds great. The second song that I think is a standout is the last song on side 1, Sea Lion. Go check out the forums, different places. People have a high opinion of the Porky cut of War Child. We're in the middle of what I'm calling the prog section today for the George Peckham episode. In 1974, Yes released their 7th album. That album is known as Relayer, and it's got that famous Roger Dean illustrated cover. This is a gatefold. Nice shot of the band here at that point in time. Now remember, in 1974, Yes had lost Rick Wakeman. So Rick Wakeman had decided to take his leave from the band at that point in time. And they went out and recruited a new keyboard player. His name was Patrick Moraz. He was a Swiss national. And legend has it that for the first time ever, Yes was going to record an album outside of London in the Surrey countryside in actually Chris Squire's garage. I think that's correct. And Relayer is a tour de force. So this album, there is well, first of all, when we're talking about prog albums, I didn't do the prog tag. I don't have a ton of prog. But yes, this does have a single song on a single side. And it also then has 2 songs on the other side. The single song on side 1 is called The Gates of Delirium. And that is an apropos title for this album. There is so much layered sound and textured sound and sounds. Everything from Chris Squire's huge bass floor on this album to the aforementioned Patrick Moraz's mini moog and keyboard stanzas that he's doing throughout. This is a really kind of a jazzy Yes album, and it's for Yes purists apparently. But it's pretty highly regarded as kind of a cult Yes album. What else was I going to say? Oh, Steve Howe famously switched guitars and was using a 1957 Telecaster on this album. And he was running that thing amped up, literally. Some of the solos are insane. And just kind of the layering and soundstage, this thing is kind of, Peckham's got this thing amped up to 11 basically. And this is a hell of a listen. If you just want a dose of prog for yourself, and you haven't heard some prog in a while and you want to have your head blown off, put on this album. Anyway, it's fairly easy to find. In the deadwax, I believe it does have Porky on this one as well, but this is the George Peckham cut. It's got that custom Atlantic Studios, that custom label, Kind of goes along with the album art. Anyway, very cool album. I've got one of the mother of all prog albums, and the Porky cut of this album is very, very highly regarded. It's in the running, as well as with the Classic Records reissue that came out, I believe it was sometime in the 2000s. And what I'm talking about, of course, is the double LP. Genesis is A Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Famously, this is the last appearance by Peter Gabriel on a studio album with Genesis. And this is a bombastic, over-the-top prog album by Genesis. Double LP. Of course, the lead song is The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. First song on side one, gorgeous song, very, very famous, of course. So Peckham did a UK and a US press for this album. There's some chatter online about there was a problem with the tape and the recording where there may be a low-level hum present. I can tell you that with this pressing that I have, and I've got a first press US Atco yellow label. The four sides of this album alternate. It's either Pecko or Porky in side 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's easy to see that in the deadwax. I don't have any hum present when I play this album, and I've got two different setups. I'm not deciphering any background hum, so I don't have to worry about that. This sounds really, really, really good. Again, a pretty good sound stage. There's plenty of bass on this, so a lot of the chatter online with these early Genesis albums, in many cases we've got muffled bass or not enough bass. There's plenty of that here. There's a lot of good mid-range as well. There is one song, Fly on a Windshield, second song on side 1. When the bass kicks in on the second stanza of this song, I thought the floor was going to drop in, or I was going to drop into the basement or something. That's how huge the bass in the soundstage is on Fly on a Windshield. So famously, Gabriel and the rest of the band were butting heads during the recording of this album. Peter Gabriel was going through some tough times with his family. His wife was having a difficult pregnancy and eventual childbirth in London. They were all the way out recording at the Grange, that famous estate where Led Zeppelin 4 was also recorded, and other albums as well. And Gabriel didn't want any input as far as lyrics were concerned. And midway through the album, according to legend, if you look into some history of this album and the recording, Gabriel had been kind of persuaded away, and there was a promise of him doing some film work, and it never panned out. But when he was gone, the band had to basically kind of finish up tracks without him, without any kind of input. Anyway, this thing eventually got mixed down, recorded, finished. Peckham was brought in to do some initial mastering versions of the album. I think it sounds great, and happy to have it in the collection. It's pretty easy to find out there. If you already have this, a lot of people have got this in their collection. Looking at deadwax, you're looking for side 1, side 2, Pecko, Porky, Pecko, Porky. Maybe it's the other way around. Anyway, alternating sides, you'll have either Porky or Pecko in the deadwax. In 1971, Led Zeppelin released Led Zeppelin 4, famous album, everybody knows it, and one of the best versions as far as pressings, masterings of that album was done by George Peckham, and there is different nomenclatures in the deadwax depending on the pressing that you have and which pressing plant it came from. You know, whenever we talk about Led Zeppelin, we kind of have to talk about beyond the mastering engineer, and sometimes the pressing plant comes into play. On my last video, I featured this album as well, and I have actually two versions of this album. This is the Presswell mastering, which was pressed in New Jersey, and I have Pecko Duck in the deadwax on side 2, and I have Porky on side 1. The second version I have is the Monarch version, and Monarch is the Monarch recording manufacturing company out of California. They are highly regarded for having excellent Led Zeppelin pressings. If you can find a Monarch, the label suffix is -MO for Monarch, and you can usually find that in the deadwax as well. But this particular pressing, I have Pecko on one side and Pecko Duck on the other. So no Porky on this one with Monarch. Now, I've given both the Presswell and the Monarch a very, very, very close listen. And honestly, I'm having a hard time deciding if one is better than the other. They both sound outstanding, though. This is a very, very nice hot mix. It rivals the Robert Ludwig famous Led Zeppelin II hot cut as far as the sound stage is concerned, as far as the clarity of the instruments, the depth of the ground and the bass. It's a gorgeous album. So that is Led Zeppelin IV, probably the most famous album mastered by George Peckham, and still pretty easy to find out there. I found a Monarch pressing on Discogs. You know, just a tip on Discogs: if the seller is accepting offers and you think it's overpriced, you know, I'll take a quick scan of the selling history data that you can see for any album, and this person had this thing in the high $30 range. The cool thing, I digress, the cool thing with this as well, the vinyl, the record is near mint. Very, very, very important for Led Zeppelin. You need to find really, really clean, if you can, and it's getting hard to do, clean copies. So very, very little surface noise, playing through in great shape if you can. Where was I going with this? Oh, right. So if they accept offers, throw out an offer. I do it quite a bit if they do accept offers, and if I think that thing is priced high, I will just put a little sentence in there, you know, would like to submit an offer of X based on the sales history data. 8 or 9 times out of 10, I will get that offer accepted, and I've got an invoice in my email to go ahead and complete the purchase. So I did that on the Monarch pressing. I think I paid $30 for it, and it's in near mint condition. That is the George Peckham episode today. I hope you all enjoyed it. As always, thank you for watching. I appreciate your attention. I appreciate all the comments that are coming in on all these various videos I've been doing. It's a lot of fun to interact with folks. That's all I have for today. I hope everyone has a great night, and I hope to see everyone back here soon. Please subscribe if you have not already subscribed to my channel. It helps out as far as discoverability in the greater YouTube universe. Thank you.